And to further unpack this case, the murder sentencing that is occurring today until Friday, we do have live in studio with us Marius Du Toit. Thank you so much for joining us here. He is a criminal lawyer.
That's right.
Firstly, tell us a little bit, what arguments could the prosecution and defense, present today?
Lauren, I think it's important to remember what the starting point is. And the starting point is there's a mandatory minimum sentence that kicks in of 15 years. And the court, by law, is only allowed to deviate from that sentence should she find substantial and compelling reasons to deviate. So if she finds substantial and compelling reasons, she can either increase it or she could decrease it. So both legal teams, I believe, will start off by focusing on that. And they will adduce evidence to try and sway the court in finding these substantial and compelling reasons. Now, what is substantial and compelling reasons? Our courts have said various things do amount to it, and there's no closed list of what is substantial and compelling. But the fact that I'm working, the fact that I have a wife and kids, the fact that you work is not substantial and compelling. It must be something extraordinary. And in this case, the fact that he's already served a year in prison, the fact that he was sentenced to 5 years, although 1 year was only effective in terms of 2761I, the fact that he has lost everything, the fact that nobody will allow him to participate in athletics any further. All these factors, I believe, cumulatively will amount to substantial and compelling reasons. And then the only question that begs is, what sentence are you then left with? And of course, I believe that the sentence will not be increased, it will only be decreased. And which means we'll maybe look at anything from 10 years upwards.
Now, I asked our ANN7 reporter previously, but now I'll turn this question to you. Has Oscar exhausted every legal option that he has had available to him?
I think he has. I do believe the defense had some difficult hurdles to climb. This never was a whodunit. It was always a question of, did he exceed the boundaries of putative self-defense from the word go? And the moment you have that, it's not one of those cases where you as a lawyer come in and you fight DNA and you fight the fact that you were not there, because it was always part and parcel of your case that you were there. So very little was in dispute from the beginning. And for that reason, there weren't many other options available. The one thing that I know that is featured in the media is whether the fact that there's been unprecedented media coverage of this matter and involvement, has that not impeded his right to a fair trial? And that's a very valid point, but it was never raised because at the time when Judge Masipa convicted him of culpable homicide, there wasn't an appeal against the conviction. There was only appeal from the state side against the conviction. So the right to a fair trial was never raised at any stage, really. And it could have been raised. It could have been said that, listen, our witnesses don't want to come to court because they're fearful of the way the media portrays them and stuff like that. But realistically speaking, Lauren, I believe he has exhausted everything. He's literally, in respect of conviction, he's been in the SCA and he's been in the Constitutional Court where they denied him access. So he's really tried everything. I listened to the social media and the guys on the social media saying that, he didn't get a fair trial and they've not exhausted everything, but he has. He's exhausted all the remedies available to him. And of course, should the sentence not go his way, one or two things will happen. Either the state could appeal for an increase to the SCA, or Oscar could say that the judge was too excessive and too harsh in giving him such a heavy sentence, and they could appeal that to the SCA. So we might not have seen the end of the legal recourse that's still available to the parties.
Now, do you believe that Oscar Pistorius will take the stand during one of these days? And if so, what are we expecting from him and what are your expectations of?
Lauren, that's a good question. I'm not sure if they will expose him again to cross-examination. You remind yourself that the first time round, it wasn't really a picnic for him when he testified. Harry Nell really went after him, and he was showed to be not a very credible witness. So why would you put your client through it again, keeping in mind that he's already not been found a credible witness? But having said that, the test is different at this stage. The court looks at his personal particulars, the court looks at him as the offender. So the aspects of retribution, rehabilitation, all these factors kick in when you consider sentence. But I would be surprised if they put him in the box. I really would be surprised. And of course he might be able to add something. I can't say that there's not something that he needs to testify on. Maybe he'll testify about prison life. I'm not sure. But realistically speaking, I'd be surprised if he goes to the box just for the sake of testifying and rehashing the same facts that we all know so well.
Interesting. And the Sunday Telegraph has reported that Reeva Steenkamp's father, Barry, might, testify. What are your expectations of this? Do you think he will testify? And also, when he testifies, what tactics should he, be going for in order to get the harsher sentence or the sentencing that he would prefer?
It's very difficult when you have a family member like that having to testify about his daughter. Irrespective of what he says, you have to keep in mind that he's biased. So he's not there as an impartial commentator, he's there as a biased family member who's lost his daughter. And if it's just for the emotion, fine, you can adduce that evidence. And I think it's important that one does get the emotion across, that the court can understand that it's not just that you not be so focused on the offender that you forget that the deceased family have suffered immensely. And irrespective of how much Oscar has suffered, we have to keep in mind that Reeva's family has suffered more, most probably, because they've lost their daughter. So you can never negate that, Lauren. But having said that, if he wants to testify, of course he could add value for the state. I don't think you would want him to say anything specific. You just want him to testify and just explain to the court what the emotions are, what have they gone through, to what impact has she had on their financial standing, because I believe she was supporting them financially. But keeping in mind that it will always be a testimony that's designed towards very emotional, and you might not always want that in a court, but if it needs to go, that's what they obviously can do.
If Pistorius receives this 15-year, jail time sentence, when will he be able to apply for parole?
All right, now we have to keep in mind that whenever any person is sentenced in terms of the Minimum Sentences Act, that's now the act that deals with minimum sentences being 15 years, Act 105 of 1997. The act stipulates that you have to serve 4/5 of your sentence, which means if you get 10 years, you have to serve 8 years. Now, I know there's certain individuals that serve 3/4 of their sentences. So the court can say, listen, I'm giving you a lesser, or the prison authorities rather, can give you a lesser period to serve because of good behavior, the fact that you're exemplary inmate and that sort of thing. But the act does stipulate a minimum period of time that you have to be inside. So one would expect, if he gets 15 years, you might expect him to be there 10 or 12 years.
And what about his time that he's already spent in prison?
Well, that will not be taken into consideration once he serves. What will happen is when the court has to consider the term of imprisonment, let's say the court now considers substantial and compelling reasons, one of the factors that she will take into consideration is the fact that he's already been serving, or he has served 1 year, and he was sentenced to 5 years. So the court has to take that into consideration. So when she gives him 12 years or 13 years or 10 years, she will then say at that stage, listen, I have taken into consideration the fact that you've already been in prison. So it's not like it will now, once he serves, be given as a discount. It will be taken into consideration in the term that's imposed by the court.
And I'm very interested in your professional opinion, as we have discussed previously. What is your consensus in terms of, people's confidence in South Africa's justice system after this whole?
Well, only have to look at the matters that have been raised recently. We saw the Concord dealing with our president. We saw recently the full bench in Pretoria that dealt with the spy tapes. We saw the way the SCA has dealt with the Oscar trial. We saw the way the Concord dealt with the application for leave to appeal. To only understand that I believe if there's one institution other than the public protector that the public at large really have a lot of faith in, it is our highest courts in the country. There's been some good judgments of late. And by good, I mean not necessarily in favor of a specific party or individual, but good judgments in the sense that it was clear, it was concise, that it led to some clarity in respect of our jurisprudence. So I believe there's really a lot of faith in our justice system. And I believe, many people might have felt that Oscar got away with murder, so to speak. And that didn't happen. So it's not a question of we've lost faith in our justice system. Those detractors that believe that, listen, Oscar's getting away with murder, at the end of the day, the SCA said it was murder. And the Concord denied him leave to appeal against the conviction. So we're only dealing with sentence now. And even if you say, if the pro-Oscar team look at the way Oscar has been dealt with in the media and so on, realistically speaking, you can't negate the fact that he shot 4 times through a door, and in anybody's language, that is murder. So I do not believe that Oscar has been treated unfairly. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. If you're a public figure, then you'll get scrutinized by the media once you make a wrong step. And it's unfortunately that tragic figure scenario that we all know in Greek mythology. So, you know, you have to say, as a whole, Lauren, I believe it's done really well for our justice system. I really believe our justice system has come out on top. Of course, during the trial, you know, we saw some bad police investigation. We saw witnesses coming across as not being the experts that we believed they were. But having said that, I think it's really been a good advert to our justice system, because many people just group us in Africa and say, well, you guys are in Africa, so you have a banana republic and you have a banana justice system. And I don't think we have that. We really have a justice system that functions well, that instills confidence in the public at large. I'm not saying that at grassroots level everybody is getting a fair trial. I'm not saying that all matters are dealt with fairly. I mean, you'll definitely find that money does buy justice, unfortunately, in this country. If you're able to afford a legal team that's the best in the country, you'll be able to sway the justice system more to your benefit than the poor chap staying and living off the public defenders helping him out. But as a whole, I believe it's been really good for our justice system.
Now, we earlier discussed the impact of social media and, media's coverage of this whole thing. What is your take on that? Do you think it was a good thing to have the media cover so intently and, in fact, sometimes, influence citizens' perspective on the trial?
Lauren, I think coming from the whole trial, that will most probably be the aspect that will be scrutinized the most. And the reason why I say that is we heard during the Oscars defense team, I think when they addressed, they specifically raised the issue that some of the witnesses are not prepared to come forward because of the fact that they saw how Mrs. Berger, one of the first state witnesses, were handled under cross-examination and how she was portrayed in the media. And that having been said, we have to keep in mind that if you see yourself on TV and you suddenly understand that your credibility has now been attacked in the media, it gives a bad portrayal of yourself, and that's the last thing you want as an individual. So I believe that, from a media perspective, it's been unprecedented. I mean, we've never ever seen any trial like this before. I mean, the Flubber trial was not nearly as public as this trial. I mean, Shreen Devani's trial was never as public as this one. So realistically speaking, I think it's maybe a once-off scenario. And because it was a once-off scenario, we all, I think the media especially, was sort of trying to find their feet in respect of coverage and what is allowed and what isn't allowed. But I think as a whole it was good. I think it was fair coverage from the media. I thought it was handled well by the media. Yes, it was a media circus, but you can't on the one side say, I'm a public figure and I lap up all the media attention I get, and now that I've made a misstep in my life, now suddenly I don't want the media in my life anymore. Unfortunately, you get the good and the bad. But I believe it was fair coverage. I believe it was amazing how the media literally covered it blow by blow. And I think from a legal perspective, Lauren, I think one of the best things that came out of this was the fact that our public was able to participate in a trial, which they never did before. I mean, you only have to watch a program on TV to understand that even the people in the media and the people in the movie industry have got no clue as to what happens in a court. And now the public has seen firsthand how advocates cross-examine, how judges participate, how witnesses testify, how witnesses are being cross-examined. So suddenly the public has had an opportunity and a glimpse of how courts function. And I think from that perspective, you can't buy that. No program can cover that.